Welcome to the Coven Chat.
Thank you for joining me here at the Maiden Circle Coven Chat podcast, where we talk all things witchy, spiritual, and human.
Hello, merry meet, and welcome. Thank you for joining me this week. In this episode, we are discussing the number 13. It's one of my favorite numbers. It felt right, considering this is our 13th episode, and this past Friday was the first Friday the 13th of the year, so it seemed like a fitting topic. Depending on who you talk to, the number 13 can have a lot of different meanings and can affect our luck in different ways. We're going to discuss that and more in today's episode, but I wanted to start with a reading. This reading is a bit more traditionally witchy, as it is the Witch's Creed from Doreen Valiente. So stick around after our pagan fun fact to hear all about the number 13. This is The Witch's Creed by Doreen Valiente. Hear now the words of the witches, the secrets we hid in the night, when dark was our destiny's pathway, that now we bring forth into light. Mysterious water and fire, the earth and the wide-ranging air, by hidden quintessence we know them, and we will keep silent and dare. The birth and rebirth of all nature, the passing of winter and spring, we share with the life universal, rejoice in the magical ring. 4 times in the year the great Sabbath returns and the witches are seen, at Lammas and Candlemas dancing, on May Eve and Old Halloween. When daytime and nighttime are equal, when sun is at greatest and least, the 4 lesser Sabbaths are summoned. Again witches gather in feast. 13 silver moons in a year are, 13 is the coven's array. 13 times at Esbat make merry, for each golden year and a day. The power has passed down the ages, each time between woman and man, each century unto the other, ere time and the ages began. When drawn is the magical circle, by sword or atham of power, its compass between 2 worlds lies in the land of the shades of that hour. Our world has no right to know it, and the world beyond will tell not. The oldest of gods are invoked there, the great work of magic is wrought. For 2 are the mystical pillars that stand at the gate of the shrine, and 2 are the powers of nature, the forms and the forces divine. The dark and the light in succession, the opposites each unto each, shone forth as a god and a goddess. Of this did our ancestors teach. By night he's the wild wind's rider, the horned one the lord of the shades. By day he's the king of the woodland, the dweller in green forest glades. She is youthful or old as she pleases. She sails the torn clouds on her bark, the bright silver lady of midnight, the crone who weaves spells in the dark. The master and mistress of magic, they dwell in the deeps of the mind, immortal and ever renewing, with power to free or to bind. So drink the good wine to the old gods, and dance and make love in their praise, till Elfham's fair land shall receive us in peace at the end of our days. And do what you will, be the challenge, so be it in love that harms none, for this is the only commandment, by magic of old be it done. So I hope you enjoyed this rendition of the Witch's Creed. Let's move on to today's fun fact.
Pagan fun fact. Here's your fun facts now.
If Gerald Gardner is the father of Wicca, then Doreen Valiente can be called the mother of modern witchcraft. Many of Doreen Valiente's writings are used in Wiccan practice, including my own. The Witch's Creed, which we read in our intro, was written by Doreen Valiente, as well as a number of different poems or texts that I use in a regular ritual for my Book of Shadows. So it only seems right that we talk a little bit about her. Doreen Valiente was born January 4th, 1922 in Mitcham, South London. It's said that as a kid, she had her first spiritual experience. She would ride around on a broomstick, running around like a kid does, around her neighborhood. This upset her parents, and they sent her to a Christian school. As a teenager, she left the school and started getting more into the occult. She'd found some books at school that sparked this interest in her, and as soon as she got into it, she never left. As she got older, she worked a variety of jobs. Most notably, she may have worked for the side of the Allies during World War II. She was born Doreen Edith Domini, and she married at the age of 19 to a Greek merchant who then passed away. Soon after, a few years later, she married Casimiro Valiente, which is how she got the name that we now know her by. Doreen continued her exploration of the craft, and years later, in 1952, she met Gerald Gardner. He soon made her the High Priestess of his coven. Together, they created history. After some years passed, they had a brief falling out. Doreen, in that time, separated from Gardner's coven to establish her own coven. They did become friends again, but they were never in the same coven after that. Valiente was initiated into a few different covens over the years, and by 1972, her husband passed away. She decided to step out of the public light as the face of witchcraft and started writing what are some of her most popular works today. These include the very popular 1978 Witchcraft for Tomorrow, which opened the doors for many Wiccans to find their faith. Valiente continued on with her studies in witchcraft, with her search for the truth, and with the sharing of everything that she found in that search. By the end of her life, she met a man named John Bellum Payne and trusted everything that she had to him. Valiente passed away in 1999 on September 1st. John established a charitable trust in her name, donating everything, all of her writings, her books, her letters, her documents, everything that she left to him, to this trust, so that it can be accessed by those who need it, so that it can never be used for profit or for malicious means. Doreen Valiente brought a much needed poeticism and femininity and softness to a practice that had been shrouded in mystery. And she brought it at a time when the world had been filled with masculine energy, had been overcome with masculine energy, and needed that added femininity, needed to reestablish its connection with the goddess, with the divine feminine. It can be argued that if not for Doreen Valiente, Wicca and modern witchcraft as we know it wouldn't exist. It would be something else. Maybe something less beautiful, maybe something only accessed by the elite, maybe something still seen as dark and hateable. Of course, we'll never know because we do have Wicca and modern witchcraft as they are. I personally love how they are. Most of the information I got for today's fun facts come from doreenvaliente.org, as well as an article in independent.co.uk, so I'll link those in the show notes as usual. I encourage you to look into Doreen Valiente, look into her writings, and just see how influential she has been to this spiritual life that so many of us have found, that has saved many of us. So that's it for our fun fact. Let's get into today's musing. So the number 13. Today's episode is a bit less of an exploration of an idea and more of a celebration of a milestone. This is our 13th episode. 13 for me has always been a lucky number. It's always been one of my favorite numbers, including 130 and recently 133. And of course the number 3. So when I started my spiritual practice, I learned a lot about the fear of the number 13, especially here in the United States. Many buildings don't have a 13th floor, and people treat the number 13 as an unlucky number. Even the building I live in right now doesn't have a marked 13th floor. If that's confusing, what I mean is if you get on the elevator, the buttons you see are going to go from floor 12 to floor 14. And that's common all over this country. I saw it in Chicago, I've seen it here, and I know it happens in other places. But somehow at some point I got it in my head that it is actually a lucky number. It could be the contrarian in me who sees the status quo and questions it immediately and decides to either shirk it or research into why it is what it is, and then decide either way after that. From what I've looked into, the reason the number 13 is seen as unlucky in the United States has to do with the Christian religion. Apparently because there were 13 diners at the Last Supper just before Jesus was killed, was taken away. That's an omen that it's a bad number. According to some sources, the disciple who decided to turn Jesus in was the 13th to sit at the table. That's Judas Iscariot, also known as one of my most favorite characters in the musical Jesus Christ Superstar. He's just so good. In many places around the world, however, 13 is seen as a very lucky number. According to our dear friend Wikipedia, 13 was a lucky number both in France and Italy, and at a place called Colgate University here in the United States. Colgate University was apparently founded by 13 men with $13, 13 prayers, and 13 articles. That's a very catchy tagline. I don't know the truth behind that, but I thought it was pretty cool to hear. And then, of course, there is our very own Wicca, in which 13 is a truly magical number. You may have noticed the passage in the Witch's Creed. 13 full moons in a year are. 13 is the coven's array. 13 times at Esbat make merry, for each golden year and a day. This speaks to the fact that many years have 13 full moons. There is one month with 2 full moons, and that 13th moon is often called a blue moon, that extra moon in the month. I don't know all the details about how that's decided, whether it's the first moon or second moon of that month, but one of those moons is called a blue moon, which is where we get the phrase, once in a blue moon. This doesn't actually happen every year, but it happens enough to affect our calendar, since our calendar is on a solar cycle. The 13th full moon, along with a leap year every 4 years, tend to shake things up. Still, for witches, that shake-up, that change in energy, that extra oomph, that added full moon magic, well, we find it very lucky. We find it very special. This might be why the number 13 is the ideal number for a coven, which is also in that passage. 13 is the coven's array, because the number of witches is aligned with that extra number of moons, with that number of magic and power. There's also the feminine aspect, which is part of what brought me into the craft and part of what inspired Maiden Circle. The average period having person tends to have 13 of those in a year. Traditionally, that is a feminine energy. Regardless of whether you're a feminine person, the menstrual cycle is a feminine thing. It holds the energy of the feminine divine. And as always, that has nothing to do with our gender. It has very little to do with our biology, even though this is a thing that happens biologically. This is a physical thing. Whether it's feminine or masculine doesn't really have anything to do with the physical. It is all energetic. So menstruation is a feminine energy, whether you're feminine or masculine as a being. And those who menstruate tend to have 13 in a year. And if you menstruate and you're surrounded by other menstruating people, you tend to align. So think of the energy, the magic of 13 witches with a cycle that happens 13 times in a year, aligning with 13 moons. It seems very clear to me why that would be considered the ideal number for a coven, especially as most covens of witches, at least when Wicca was really gaining its power, were filled with women or filled with feminine energies. Of course, they didn't only address the feminine energy. So many covens did have masculines. They had the High Priest. They had, of course, Gerald Gardner. He was a masculine person in a coven. With the rise of Doreen Valiente in Wicca and her feminine energy that she put into her writing, it became very, very popular with feminine people in the 90s, especially after the spiritual awakening of the 60s and 70s and the growing use of psychedelics in those decades. People were becoming a lot more awakened to the feminine divine, to their feminine energy. And so Wicca really boomed. Along with it came this new love for femininity. For me, 13 is a very feminine number, whereas I think the number 3 on its own is a bit feminine. It is also a lot more balanced between masculine and feminine, and I consider the number 1 to have masculine energy. It's very direct, very active, very straightforward. New beginnings tend to have this active, gung-ho, young, masculine cowboy energy. And then number 3 is more of a nurturing, pregnant, combination of partnerships and masculinity. It's got some masculine in it because it's a combination of 2 and 1, but I feel like it leans more feminine. And so 13 overall leans more feminine. When it comes to things like the tarot, we have the number 13 card, which is usually the death card, which again represents new beginnings and endings. It represents transition and change and rebirth. Then, of course, if we do break that down into its components, again, we have card number 1, which is the Magician, I believe, and card number 3, which is the Empress. So again, we have this masculine and feminine balance. We have this powerful masculine symbol from the Magician. This I can do anything and everything, all my tools are available to me. And then we have this nurturing, giving, loving, incubating energy from the Empress. She's not only already giving care and nurture to those around her, but she's preparing something to be created. So again, when you combine those 1 and 3 energies, we have this energy of perfect balance. We have this energy of power and creation. If we take it a bit further into numerology and break down 13, again, we have 4. 4 is a number of stability and of balance. The number 4 is all about practicality, organization, orderliness. It's symbolized by the square, which is the basic building block for physical construction. It's a very physical number. The number 1 is also a physical number. It has to do with our active expression and communication with others. It has to do with divine expression of our ego, and verbal self-expression. Being that these two, 4 and 1, are physical, again, I would say that that is a masculine energy, while number 3 is a mental, feminine energy. It's about the mind, it's about understanding, it's about connection between the mind, the soul, and the body. Again, there's that balance, and it is represented by the triangle. Maybe the reason I like the number 13 so much is that these numbers align with our life path numbers. My life path number is a 422. 13, again, breaks down to a 4, so maybe that's why. I'll talk more deeply about life path numbers in another episode, but just briefly, if you are a life path number 1, you might find yourself to be very ambitious and independent with huge goals. Some may even say that your goals seem impossible. You might be a bit of a workaholic with a tendency to hyper-focus and maybe a bit over-reliant and oversure of yourself. If you're life path number 3, you may find yourself very communicative and expressive. You might be very creative, charismatic, optimistic, and generous. Life path number 3s tend to be positive people and in touch with their emotions. They work well with others, so when you bring these two life path numbers together, 1 and 3, we have one who tends to be very independent and very sure of themselves, paired with one who is very open and giving and interdependent, not necessarily codependent, but able to give and receive in a very healthy, balanced way. No matter how you slice it, when you put 1 and 3 together, you get balance, you get harmony, you get magic. 3 is already a magical number, and when hit with the power boost that is the number 1, it's not difficult to see why 13 is such a unique and special number. It's not difficult to see why there is lore behind this number, movies about this number. In the Jewish religion, 13 is the age a boy becomes a young man, an official member of the Jewish community. There are 13 cards in each suit of both the standard playing deck and the standard tarot minor arcana. 13 is the coven's array, and I hope that all of you make merry for each golden year and a day. If you find yourself with some time to think, look around and see how 13 is represented in your life, in your country, in your home. See if the number presents itself to you in a way it never has before. Notice if it's been around for a while. And if it has, consider the experiences and feelings you had in those times it was around that you didn't even notice. But of course, as I said, this episode is more of just a celebration of the number, so you don't really have to do anything, but know that it's there, and know that it's lucky. Know that it's shrouded in positivity, excluding a few tales. So that's all I have to say about it. Thank you so much for being here. Let's move on to our divination. In this reading, we're using the Soul Healing Oracle and the Gilded Tarot as a clarifier. We have the Stone, slow-moving, long-term change, heaviness. We have the Shadows of the Soul, shadow work, secrets, hidden truths. We have Take Back Your Power, inner strength, leadership, confidence. We have Soul Journey, changes coming, new experiences, evolution. We have soul messages, messages from your ancestors, higher knowing, messages from the divine. On the bottom of the deck, we have the Man, masculine energy, mature, authoritative. For numbers, we have 56, which is an 11, 22, which is a 4, 42, which is a 6, another 6, another 4, and 38, which is another 11. Our main numbers here are 11, 6, 4, and 2, because we have 22 Shadows of the Soul followed by 42. So we have 222 here, we have 44, we have 66. So look into those numbers, see if they have any meaning for you. What I get is that this is a journey that has been going on for a while, one in which you've been trying to uncover who you are, trying to build confidence in yourself, trying to evolve, trying to become who you believe you're meant to be. There is a journey of personal self-understanding that you've been on for a very long time that has drastically changed you from the person you were maybe even 2 years ago. This message might be for a masculine person, an older masculine person. You may be an older masculine person with the Man as our underdeck energy. You've had to do a lot of work on yourself. You feel like maybe you've lost your power. Maybe you were, I don't want to say victimized, but that's the first word that comes to mind. Maybe you were victimized. Maybe you were made to feel smaller. Maybe you were emasculated and you like being a masculine person, so you didn't feel your masculinity, because we have take back your power, take back your leadership, your inner strength. You probably had to overcome some lies, but more so I'm thinking you had to open up secrets within yourself. You had to reveal things about yourself that maybe you had suppressed or had ignored, and you can't ignore it anymore. So I'm going to pull some clarifiers to see if we can dig a little deeper into this message. We have the Ace of Swords, we have the Wheel of Fortune, we have the Eight of Cups, we have the Knight of Pentacles, we have the Eight of Wands, we have the Hermit, we have the Star, and that's it. On the bottom of the deck, we have the Four of Pentacles. So the main message of the Ace of Swords is about communication. It's about direct, open, and honest communication. With the Wheel of Fortune, the first thing I got was choice. The first word that came to mind when I pulled it was choice. And in many ways, the Wheel of Fortune is about you deciding to go along with the natural rhythm of things, deciding to shake things up. The wheel itself is representative of the wheel of the year and the wheel of time, and the fact that life comes in cycles. It has its ups and it has its downs. The Eight of Cups is about leaving something behind, usually something emotionally connected, and taking only with you what continues to serve. So letting go of heartaches or resentments or grudges, things that don't serve us, and moving forward with love in our heart towards the things that do serve us, so that we can take action towards our goals, towards our dreams. That's also represented by the full moon on the card. The next three cards actually came out together. They were all stuck together. The Knight of Pentacles, the Eight of Wands, and the Hermit. So the Knight of Pentacles is someone who is very overwhelmed and unsure of how to move forward, even though they are also very abundant. They are clad in green and gold, surrounded by lush green plants and fertile bugs. They have so much going for them, but it always brings to mind the saying, you can't see the forest for the trees. They are just so overwhelmed by how much is available to them. The Eight of Swords represents a transition or a message. Many readers see it as sending an online message, so maybe you just need to speak to someone. Maybe you need to, seek out a therapist. I don't know why, very specific message came through. But in context with the Knight of Pentacles, it kind of gives me the vibe of transitioning out of that sense of overwhelm and sense of being overcrowded to a sense of chosen isolation with the Hermit. It's taking time to forge your own path, to figure out your own path, which I think falls into alignment with the oracle cards that we did have of the soul journey and evolving and growing and going from feeling small and victimized to feeling whole and self-actualized, self-understanding. And then at last we have the Star, which typically represents wishes coming true. It represents emotional abundance and mental balance. Especially with this card, there's a light coming from her head. It is also shining on this huge device behind her, and she is pouring water into water. And there's this beautiful, huge daisy sort of coming out of one of her vases. And it just sort of gives me this vibe of pouring life into yourself and receiving from the divine, receiving life and knowledge and understanding and knowing from the divine, which looking back goes along with the soul messages card, which is messages from your ancestors, higher knowing, messages from the divine. So this is all about this journey to communicate clearly. Actually, I just had another thought with the Ace of Swords. It not only represents clear communication, but it also represents cutting something off or cutting something away, which would fall in line with that Eight of Cups that comes right after it. It's like you made that choice to cut something off, to leave something behind, and you're moving towards this new abundance, but it's so overwhelming that you're not really sure how to get through it. Not really sure what path to take. And again, I think communication might be the answer here with this Ace of Swords, this Eight of Wands, and soul messages. Communication might be the key, and that could be communicating, in a diary, writing in a journal, just getting everything that you feel out and on paper and contextualized so that it's less jumbled up. Because with emotions, I often think of emotions as this sort of mess. It's like this jumbled up bunch of stuff inside of us. When I write it down, it becomes clear to me. When I write it down, I have a way better understanding of what was going on inside of me than when I was just sort of mulling over it in my head. We also, again, have this Four of Pentacles at the bottom of the deck and a Four of Wands. So that's yet another four in our reading. Four of Wands was peeking out under the Four of Pentacles. We have this energy of a very selfish, self-contained person, but underneath it is stability. So it's possible you just feel the need for stability, so you haven't been able to open up, you haven't been able to communicate, you haven't been able to connect with that higher self and with the divine. You haven't really been able to hear the messages. Again, you haven't been able to see the forest for the trees. You've just been overwhelmed. There's just been so much that you've sort of cocooned into yourself, but not necessarily in a healthy way. It comes from a need for stability, though. I'm going to pull a few cards to ask what steps you might take from here. We have the Queen of Swords, we have the Ten of Cups, and on the bottom of the deck we have the Seven of Swords. So I'll start by saying what these cards typically represent. The Queen of Swords represents a knowledgeable, communicative woman. She has a very cool energy about her. She's very chill, but her sword is pointed upwards, her hand lightly resting on it, so that if she needs to use it, she can. Still, she doesn't give off a angry vibe. She doesn't give off a guarded vibe. But if she needs to wield her weapon, she's very able to. She's wise. She is calculated and thoughtful. The Ten of Cups is all about love and family and home. If you're looking at it from perspective of, say, a traveler, you're looking at your wife, your child, your cat, your home. You're looking at fertility and abundance, growth and comfort. These two together have an interesting kind of balance. The warm colors of the Ten of Cups, the cool colors of the Queen of Swords. The softness of the cups, the sharpness of the sword. The cups being water, the swords being air, two seemingly incompatible elements. But when you combine water and air, especially if you blow in it, you get bubbles. You get something fun and light and ephemeral, something that doesn't have to be too serious, doesn't have to be perfect, but brings joy. There's a balance between these two cards. I think the message for you is to think very logically and calculated and specifically about what is going to bring you this sense of home, of abundance, of comfort, of nurturing, of joy. What feels like home? If you have to make lists or charts, and do it in a very logical way that may help you. I think this is a message to try to combine your mind with your heart, with your joy, in fact, because sometimes our brain can latch on to the bad. I think with this Eight of Cups, it's kind of saying we're letting go of those shadows, especially with the messages we got from the oracle cards, this long process of having been in these shadows, of having felt small, having felt emasculated or victimized, having felt like our power had been taken from us. You're now evolving, and I think this is saying that you have to take this evolution into your own hands and evolve intentionally. Do the things that are going to lead you towards this joy, do the things, and you have been doing them. I think this, again, has been a long journey, so you have been doing them, but you haven't fully given in to the possibilities. You haven't fully given in to what your heart is craving and what is home. You haven't fully gone home. You haven't let yourself. With the Seven of Swords on the bottom of the deck, you've been holding back. There's something you still haven't revealed. There's something you still haven't opened yourself up to. Again, because of that Knight of Pentacles feeling of overwhelm and feeling stuck in the weeds. So get logical, get physical, write it down. Do pros and cons lists, make a chart, make columns, bring it out of your head and into fruition. Speak, communicate to someone. Again, if you need to get a therapist, there is no shame in therapy. It can be a lifesaver. Talk to someone. Open up. Get whatever is inside of you out. It is no longer a lonely, single journey for you. This is something that you need to now release from yourself in some way. Write a book. Get it out of you. And then look at it again and see where your heart is leading you. And then go there. So that's your message. I do hope it resonated. And I wish you all the best. I wish you so much luck on this journey and so much healing, so much continued healing. Of course, if you'd like to book a private reading, you can via the link in the description. Thank you again so much for joining me in today's episode. I appreciate every one of you out there. I love you. I send you with thousands and thousands of tons of love and just as many blessings. Bye now.